And joining me now live here on the set is Sergeant Michael Curley with the Utica Police Department. So let's talk first about Lincoln Ave, the West Utica homicide there. The first question I have is, what was the relationship between the person who was killed and the prostitute?
We believe they were in some kind of romantic relationship for a period of time, and that they had prior knowledge of each other for quite significant time.
And then he had $3,000 in cash on him, and I noticed on social media a lot of people asking that question. Why did someone have $3,000 in cash on him at that time?
We believe through interviews from him, as well as corroboration from the casino, we believe he was at the Turning Stone Casino prior to that, and all cash proceeds were a direct result of any kind of gambling or associated acts at the casino, rather than something going on at the residence on Lincoln.
And so did this off-duty police officer have some sort of relationship with those two people on Lincoln Ave then?
Not prior to the night, from what we understand. It was simply a transaction related to prostitution-related activity, as found on an internet website. Internet website.
Okay, let's move forward now to the double homicide on Tilden Ave. We have two victims here, and now the latest victim is the grandmother, Catherine Aubain, and then of course we also have Jane Wentka, the landlord there, and tonight we have Nathan Aubain in police custody out of the hospital, like you just heard Jolene talk about. First, I guess let's ask, you mentioned Clayville. Where in Clayville did we find the grandmother?
Off Oneida Street. It's in a park. Exactly the name of the park, I'm not entirely sure, but in the southern area of Clayville, off the distance, you pull into kind of a gravel road, and there's a little park area, and it was near the park area.
And how did you guys know to go there?
We received information from an anonymous tip, or information thereof, and to look at there.
And then where did you find the landlord?
The landlord, unfortunately, had been decapitated as well as dismembered, so portions of her were located in the residence, and unfortunately the remainder of her was located on Pond Lane near Albany Street.
We showed video last night during our 11 o'clock newscast of surveillance video from a business next door. You guys were investigating that. Do you believe that to be the body of who?
I don't think we can determine exactly who the body was based on the nature that one was in Clayville and portions of another were unfortunately on, as I stated, on Pond Lane. So to be directly evident as to who that was, I don't think we can be sure. And
do you even know for sure that it was a body?
No, we don't. I guess you know, all evidence points to that way, I would suppose. But based on a timeline of events at this point, we don't really know.
How do we know how the two were killed?
We understand and believe at this point through interviews with the suspect that it was through a blunt object, such as a knife or something of that nature. But the veracity of that is still being investigated.
Do you know who was killed first?
We don't.
Do you know why they were killed?
We don't yet. No.
Is there any sort of mental history, mental issues with the suspect?
There is. He is under treatment currently in the Oneida County Utica City Court Mental Health Project. With respect to that and further charges, I guess that has to be explored, but we do know there are some histories of mental health.
This case, in many ways, it reminds us of Bumbelow. And what is it like for officers to come into a scene like that? I mean, I just can't imagine. I know you have training for stuff like this, but what is that?
Sure, I don't think any of the training can prepare you for exactly what you locate in that scene. And interestingly enough, you mentioned Bumbelow. It was 3 years to the day of the Paul Bumbelow incident. And when you walk in and you see body parts and quite the scene that was there, I don't think, no matter how long you have on the job, it still is a shock to the system. And you know, unfortunately, we have a job to do, and thankfully there are officers who are prepared to deal with that kind of stuff.
And then moving forward, what happens next in this case?
So at this point, Nathan Aubain is at the police station. Charges are being prepared, and he will be charged with 2 counts of murder in the first degree, and will proceed. The investigation obviously is not over with respect to, as you said, motive and who was killed first in the timeline and things like that. We'll continue to investigate, but I think the meat and potatoes of the investigation is over. It's the pickup work that's continuing.
And one last question, do you believe drugs were involved?
We don't at this point have any indication of any kind of intoxicating substance, be it drugs or alcohol. So again, motive and the nature of the crimes are still being investigated.
And I actually have another one too. How long did they live in that apartment? Because when we talked to some neighbors, they had said that the apartment was empty at one point.
There was an incident between Nathan and his grandmother in February of 2018. So we're at least a year where he was residing there, and we believe she was residing there for a period of time prior to that as well.
All right. Sergeant Michael Curley with the Utica Police Department. Thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you very much.
Really appreciate all the insight and information. Bill, over to you for a first look at the forecast.